Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We're tackling some seriously big brain stuff today.
Yeah, we're going deep on all things philosophy.
That's right. And we're doing it to get you prepped for your Introduction to Philosophy course at CWI.
Think of this like a crash course in all the major philosophical ideas.
I like it. A philosophy boot camp.
Exactly. By the end of this, you'll be dropping philosophical knowledge like a pro.
So no more feeling intimidated by philosophy.
No more intimidation. Just pure philosophical awesomeness.
Okay, I'm sold.
Yeah.
Where do we begin?
Well, let's kick things off with one of the most fundamental branches. Metaphysics?
Metaphysics.
Yeah.
The study of the nature of reality.
Yeah, we're talking the really big questions here. What is real? What exists? How do we even know?
Those are some pretty deep questions. How does that relate to my PHI 101 class?
Metaphysics is the foundation for almost every other area of philosophy, so understanding these basic ideas is key.
Okay, like building a house. You need a solid foundation.
Precisely. You can't debate about whether something is right or wrong if you don't have a grasp on what that something is in the first place.
Makes sense. So give me a taste of what kind of metaphysical stuff I'll be encountering in class.
Buckle up, because we're going to be pondering things like causation.
Causation, like cause and effect.
Exactly. Is causation just a pattern that we observe? Or are events actually connected in some deeper way?
I'm already feeling my brain stretching.
And then there's a question of time and space. Are they absolute or relative? This one has been boggling the minds of physicists for centuries.
That's some serious brain-bending stuff. I remember something about ontology being a part of metaphysics. What's that all about again?
Okay, so ontology is like zooming in on a specific part of metaphysics.
Okay, like a close-up shot.
Exactly. Ontology focuses on the categorization of things that exist. Imagine you're creating a video game. You'd need to decide what kinds of entities exist in that world, right?
Sure. You'd have characters, objects, environments.
Right. And how do all those things relate to each other? Ontology is kind of like that, but for our reality.
So it's like creating a blueprint for reality itself.
You got it. Ontology helps us understand what exists and how all the pieces fit together. And this is crucial for understanding other philosophical puzzles, like the mind-body problem.
I heard of that. That's the whole, how does our mind relate to our physical body thing, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so metaphysics is like the big picture, and ontology zooms in on the building blocks. Got it. Now what's next?
Let's move on to epistemology, the study of knowledge.
Right. How do we know what we know?
Exactly. It gets into all the nitty-gritty of justification, truth, and belief. Philosophers usually define knowledge as justified true belief.
So you need to believe something, have good reasons for believing it, and it actually needs to be true.
Exactly. Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Well, it turns out it's not as simple as it seems. Enter the Gettier problem.
What's the Gettier problem?
It's a famous philosophical challenge to that classic definition of knowledge.
Oh boy. Okay, give me an example.
Imagine you look at a broken clock that happens to be showing the right time. You form the belief that it's, say, 3:00 p.m.
Okay.
Your belief is true. It really is 3:00 p.m. And you have justification because you saw it on the clock. But is that really knowledge?
That's a good point. It seems like it's not real knowledge, just a lucky coincidence.
Right. So the Gettier problem shows that justified true belief might not be enough for real knowledge.
So how do we solve this problem?
That's where things get interesting. Philosophers have come up with all sorts of solutions, and you'll dive into those in your PHI 101 class.
Okay, so epistemology is about how we know things. And it can get super tricky.
That's part of the fun. It really makes you think critically about things we take for granted.
All right, where do we go from here?
Let's explore the world of ethics.
Ethics? That's something we all deal with every day, right?
Absolutely. Every decision you make involves ethics, from how you treat others to what you choose to eat. But in PHI 101, you'll be introduced to different ethical frameworks that philosophers have developed over centuries.
Frameworks? Like what?
Well, one major framework is consequentialism.
Consequentialism.
Yeah, it judges actions based on their outcomes, like the ends justify the means approach. The most famous version of this is utilitarianism, which focuses on maximizing happiness.
So a utilitarian would say that the right action is the one that creates the most happiness for the most people.
You got it. But this raises some questions. What about individual rights? Is it ever okay to sacrifice the well-being of a few for the benefit of many?
That's a good point. It's not always so simple.
Right. Now, another big ethical framework is deontology.
Deontology.
This one focuses on moral duties and principles regardless of the consequences.
So deontologists would say that some actions are just inherently right or wrong, no matter what.
Exactly. They might say, for example, that lying is always wrong, even if it could save someone's life.
That seems pretty strict. So it's more about sticking to your principles even if the outcome isn't ideal.
You got it. Now, what about virtue ethics?
Virtue ethics. Refresh my memory on that one.
Virtue ethics shifts the focus from actions to character. Instead of asking, what should I do? It asks, what kind of person should I be?
So it's more about being a good person than following rules or calculating outcome.
Exactly. It emphasizes cultivating virtues like honesty, courage, compassion, and justice.
It's like trying to be the best version of yourself, morally speaking.
Precisely. It's about personal growth and flourishing as a moral being.
Okay, so we've got consequentialism focusing on outcomes, deontology emphasizing principles, and virtue ethics all about character.
Got it. Now let's move on to something a bit more logical.
Logic. I'm ready to sharpen my reasoning skills.
Well, in FHL 101, you'll be doing a lot of argument analysis, and logic is the tool you'll need. It's all about figuring out if an argument is valid.
Valid meaning.
The conclusion follows logically from the premises, and also whether it's sound.
Sound me.
It's both valid and the premises are true.
Okay, so can you give me an example?
Sure. How about this? All philosophy students are deep thinkers. You're a philosophy student, therefore you're a deep thinker.
Okay, so the structure of that argument makes sense. But the first premise, that all philosophy students are deep thinkers, that's debatable.
Exactly. So the argument is valid but not necessarily sound. Logic helps us see those subtle distinctions.
So I need to be on the lookout for these kinds of flaws in reasoning.
Yes, both in your philosophy class and in everyday life, logic is a powerful tool for critical thinking.
Absolutely. Okay, what's next on our philosophical adventure?
Let's dive into the sometimes turbulent world of political philosophy.
Political philosophy. Now that sounds like it could get intense.
It can be. We'll be tackling questions about justice, power, rights, and the ideal form of government. You'll get to explore different political ideologies and theories about how society should be organized.
So who are some of the big thinkers in political philosophy?
Well, you'll definitely be introduced to Plato. He had some interesting ideas about democracy.
What kind of ideas?
He actually believed that Athenian democracy was flawed because it gave too much power to the uninformed masses.
Whoa. That's a hot take. So much for rule by the people.
He believed that governing requires knowledge and expertise, just like any other craft.
So he's saying that ruling should be like being a doctor or a pilot. You need specific skills and knowledge.
Exactly. He wouldn't want an untrained person performing surgery or flying a plane, and he didn't want an uninformed population making important decisions about justice or war.
That's a really interesting perspective. But who gets to decide who has this wisdom to rule?
That's a good question, and that's where his idea of philosopher kings comes in.
Philosopher kings.
He envisioned rulers who were experts in philosophy, trained from a young age to be wise and just.
So basically a government of philosophy professors. Not sure how well that would work out in practice.
It's definitely a controversial idea, but Plato's critique of democracy raises some important questions that are still relevant today. How do we balance the idea of popular rule with the need for expertise and effective leadership?
Wow. So political philosophy isn't just about elections and policy.
It gets much deeper than that. It's about the very foundations of how we organize society.
My brain is definitely getting a workout today. We've covered metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, logic, and now political philosophy.
And that's just a taste. We'll be unpacking these ideas in more detail in the rest of our deep dive.
Well, I'm already feeling more prepared to tackle my FHL 101 class. Bring on part 2.
Let's do it. Okay, so ready to keep going with our philosophy deep dive?
Yeah, definitely. Let's unpack some more of those big concepts.
All right, let's do it. We left off talking about metaphysics, so let's jump back into that.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of stuck on this whole ontology thing, like what actually exists out there.
That's a great question. It's a question that has been pondered by philosophers for centuries.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what's the answer?
Well, there isn't really one simple answer, but let me give you an example. Let's talk about a chair.
A chair.
Seriously. Yeah, think about it. What is a chair?
It's a thing you sit on, with 4 legs and a back.
Right. But is that all it is? Is it just a collection of atoms arranged in a specific way? Or is it something more than that?
I never thought of it that way. I guess I just assumed it's, well, a chair.
That's what's so cool about philosophy. It makes you question even the simplest things. An ontologist would ask, does a chair exist even if no one is looking at it?
Whoa, that's trippy. So does it.
That's the debate. There's no easy answer. But it gets us thinking about the nature of existence itself.
So in my FHL 101 class, will I be debating the ontological status of chairs?
Maybe not chairs specifically, but you'll definitely be grappling with similar questions about different kinds of entities. Physical objects, minds, abstract concepts.
Okay, so it's all about figuring out what exists and how to categorize all the stuff in the universe.
Exactly. Ontology gives us a framework for understanding the basic building blocks of reality.
I see how that connects to metaphysics now. It's like
Yeah.
ontology is a close-up view within the bigger metaphysical picture.
You got it. Now, how about we shift gears and talk about ethics?
Ethics. Yeah, let's do it. I remember you talked about consequentialism and deontology. Those seem pretty different.
They are. But let's see how they might play out in a real-life situation. Have you ever heard of the trolley problem?
Vaguely. Remind me what that is.
Okay, imagine a runaway trolley is headed straight for 5 people. You're standing by a lever that can switch the trolley onto a sidetrack. But there's one person on that track.
Oh, wow. So it's like a choose-your-own-adventure with some pretty high stakes.
Exactly. Do you pull the lever, sacrificing 1 life to save 5? Or do you do nothing and let fate run its course?
Man, that's tough. I think I'd pull the lever. I mean, saving 5 lives is better than 1, right?
That's a very consequentialist way of thinking. A utilitarian, for example, would likely agree with you. They'd focus on maximizing overall happiness.
But it still feels wrong to intentionally cause someone's death, even if it means saving others.
Right. And that's where deontology comes in. A deontologist might argue that you shouldn't pull the lever.
Because it's morally wrong to kill someone, even if it's to save others.
Exactly. They'd focus on the principle that it's always wrong to intentionally cause harm, no matter what the outcome might be.
So deontology is about sticking to your moral code, even when it's really difficult.
That's a good way to put it. Now, what about virtue ethics? How do you think a virtue ethicist would approach this dilemma?
Well, if virtue ethics is about being a good person, I guess they'd ask themselves, what would a virtuous person do in this situation?
That's a great insight. Virtue ethics isn't about following a set of rules. It's about developing good character traits and using those to guide your actions.
Okay, so it's more about using your judgment and trying to do the right thing based on your values.
Exactly. And in a situation like the trolley problem, there might not be one clear right answer. It depends on the person and their own moral compass.
Man, ethics is complicated.
It is, but that's what makes it so interesting. Now let's talk about political philosophy.
Okay, back to politics. You mentioned Plato earlier and how he wasn't a big fan of democracy.
Yeah, he had some issues with the way Athenian democracy worked. He was worried that giving power to the masses could lead to bad decisions.
So he didn't trust the people to make good choices.
He thought that governing requires expertise. Just like any other skill, you wouldn't want someone with no medical training performing surgery, right?
Okay, that's a good point. But how do you decide who has the knowledge and skills to govern?
That's the million-dollar question. Plato's solution was his idea of philosopher kings.
Like kings who are also philosophers.
Exactly. He envisioned rulers who were trained from a young age to be wise, just, and knowledgeable. Basically experts in governing.
So like a government run by philosophy professors.
Kind of. Although I doubt many philosophy professors would want that job.
Yeah, it's definitely a controversial idea. But I can see where he's coming from. There's a balance between giving people a voice and making sure that decisions are made by people who know what they're doing.
That's exactly the kind of tension that political philosophy explores, the relationship between power, knowledge, and justice.
Okay, this is all making me think a lot harder than I expected.
That's the point.
Nah.
Now let's switch gears again. How about some logic?
Logic. Bring on. I'm ready for a mental workout.
Well, in philosophy, you'll be encountering a lot of arguments. And logic helps us break down those arguments and see if they hold water.
Okay, so give me an example of a logical fallacy, something I should be on the lookout for.
Sure. How about the ad hominem attack?
Ad hominem, what's that?
It's when you attack the person making the argument instead of addressing the argument itself. Like saying, you can't trust anything he says, he's a convicted felon.
Oh, right. So just because someone has done something wrong in the past doesn't mean their argument is automatically invalid.
Exactly. Their past actions don't necessarily have anything to do with the logic of their current argument.
That's a good point. What's another common fallacy?
How about the straw man fallacy? This is when you misrepresent your opponent's argument to make it easier to attack.
Okay, so like twisting their words to make them look bad.
Yeah, like saying, my opponent wants to ban all cars because he hates freedom, when in reality, their argument is much more nuanced than that.
So it's like creating a fake version of their argument and then tearing it down.
Exactly. These fallacies are often used to distract from the real issues and win an argument through trickery rather than sound reasoning.
So I need to watch out for these tricks both in my philosophy class and in the real world.
Definitely. Logic is all about clear and critical thinking, and it's an essential skill for navigating the world of ideas.
Okay, I'm definitely going to need to brush up on my logic skills before class starts.
Don't worry, you'll get plenty of practice in PHL 101. Now, before we wrap up this section, let's go back to epistemology for a minute.
Okay, back to the study of knowledge. What do we need to cover there?
Well, we talked about how knowledge is often defined as justified true belief. But how do we justify our beliefs? There are different theories about that.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned foundationalism and coherentism.
Right. Those are two big ones.
Can you remind me how those work again? Okay, remind me again how foundationalism and coherentism work.
All right, so imagine you're building a tower of knowledge.
Okay, a knowledge tower.
With foundationalism, you start with a solid base of beliefs that you can't really doubt.
Like, I exist, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Those are your foundational beliefs. And then you build up from there, justifying other beliefs based on that solid foundation.
So it's like each belief rests on the beliefs below it.
You got it. It's a very structured approach to knowledge. Now, coherentism is a bit different.
How so?
Well, instead of a tower, imagine a web.
A web of beliefs.
Yeah. With coherentism, beliefs are justified by how well they fit together. They support each other.
Okay, so there's no single foundation. It's more about the overall consistency of the belief system.
Precisely. It's like a puzzle. Each belief gets its strength from its connection to the other beliefs.
That makes sense. It's like how different scientific theories can support each other, even if none of them are absolutely certain on their own.
Exactly. So foundationalism is all about building up from a solid base, and coherentism is about the interconnectedness of beliefs.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. Now let's talk about something a bit more practical. My PHIL 101 class at CWI. What can I actually expect in terms of assignments and stuff?
Well, from what I've seen on the syllabus, it looks like a pretty standard intro to philosophy course.
Okay, so lectures, readings, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you'll have lectures where the professor introduces the big ideas.
Yeah.
And then you'll have readings to dig deeper into those ideas. You'll probably also have some writing assignments, most likely, and maybe some online discussions or participation in class.
So no surprise, pop quizzes on the meaning of life.
Uh-huh. I wouldn't rule anything out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like a pretty typical philosophy course structure.
Okay, that's good to know. Can you break down those components a bit more? Like, what will the lectures be like?
The lectures will probably be a mix of introducing key concepts, discussing important philosophers, and maybe even some interactive stuff.
Okay, and the reading.
You'll be reading excerpts from classic philosophical texts, so get ready to wrestle with some dense and challenging material.
Yikes. Sounds intense.
It can be, but that's part of what makes philosophy so rewarding. You really have to think hard and engage with the ideas.
Okay, what about those online discussions you mentioned? Are those mandatory?
They probably are, but they're a great way to connect with your classmates, ask questions, and test out your own ideas.
Okay, so no hiding in the back of the class.
No hiding allowed. Philosophy is all about dialogue and debate. Now let's talk about that essay.
The big one. What kind of philosophical masterpiece am I going to have to produce?
Well, it's your chance to really showcase what you've learned in the course. You'll probably get to choose a specific topic or question to explore.
So I can focus on something that really interests me.
Exactly. And you'll use everything you've learned throughout the course to develop your own argument.
So it's not just about regurgitating information. It's about thinking critically and forming my own opinions.
Precisely. This is your chance to show off your philosophical skills, your ability to analyze, synthesize, and argue.
Okay. I'm both excited and terrified at the same time.
That's a good place to be. It means you're taking it seriously.
Well, thanks to this deep dive, I am definitely feeling more prepared to tackle PHI 101 head on.
I'm glad to hear it. Remember, philosophy is a journey, and the more you engage with the ideas, the more rewarding it becomes.
I'm ready for the challenge. Thanks for being my philosophical guides on this deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much already.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, this is just the beginning. Your philosophy class will be an incredible opportunity to continue exploring these ideas and developing your own philosophical voice.
I can't wait. And for all our listeners out there, if you're even a little bit curious about philosophy, I highly recommend checking out an intro class.
You might be surprised by how much you enjoy it.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to the deep dive. We'll see you next time.